What's the good word, Josh? Your boy DKB here. So, too many offensive needs, or should we really be prioritizing Bryce Huff as our number one option heading into the offseason? It's a pretty interesting question. I've heard from Aaron Rodgers and, Robert Saleh and plenty of, NFL experts and analysts and stuff when they've mentioned that the New York Jets have plenty of hard decisions to make this offseason. And it was interesting to me because it really didn't feel like that, right? We talked about it before. It actually feels like, in terms of our own free agent players anyways, that we know exactly who we want to move on from. And if I had to pick one player on each side of the ball that may be a quote-unquote hard decision to make, it would be Zach Wilson on the offense and would be Bryce Huff on the defense, right? Excluding the Zach Wilson conversation, when it comes to Bryce Huff, it is very interesting, right? You want to try to keep the majority of your pieces that for 2 years in a row now have been elite, defensively. And I still fully believe that if you have a more balanced offensive game to help out the defense, you see an even better version of what we've seen so far. So that's the hope going into the offseason, right? We need Aaron Rodgers to, of course, stay healthy. We need to add a couple of pieces to help them out. But overall, you want to be able to actually have some great third down efficiency. You want to have a good flow to the game, being able to utilize the run, being able to control the time of possession, all that good kind of stuff. All of that helps out the defense. One of the most important players in said defense is Bryce Huff, right? Undrafted free agent guy, came out of the blue. He's essentially led the league in most pass rushing metrics, right? That'll be vital to or correlates to success. And I know we had the big one. I think it's the one I put in the thumbnail, right? The last 2 years, we've seen him lead the league in pressure percentage, which even if the sacks aren't coming, right? This is the whole Quinnen Williams sack conversation. Affecting the quarterback is essentially the name of the game. And if you can do that consistently, like we've seen out of Bryce Huff, then you have a guy that you want to retain. The issue is that we've been able to accumulate a ton of resources that have been put into the defense and continuing to bring in pieces. But it might just be a case of bad timing with Bryce Huff, right? Obviously, the way that we built out that defensive line, we have a plethora of picks, first-round picks there. We have our extended guys in Quinnen Williams, John Franklin Myers, and then, some of the perennial re-signing players that we keep bringing. Think Solomon Thomas. Think I would throw Tanzel Smart into that mix, even though he hasn't generally seen regular season games for the most part. But I brought the conversation up about the New York Jets needing to acquire a second round pick, right? If there was a guy on the roster that could be somewhat expendable that can get that return for us, it would be a guy like Bryce Huff. The question would be is, how much of a decline would this defense have not having a guy like Bryce Huff out there? We've seen a stretch for 2 to 3, maybe 4 weeks at various points from the last 2 seasons where the defensive line as a whole didn't look that great, right? Sacks weren't coming. We weren't even generally affecting the quarterback a ton. And this came at a portion of time where Bryce Huff wasn't getting fed a steady stream of snaps. But when he came onto the field, the defense instantly came to life, right? So you have to take stuff like that into consideration, right? If we fall into a drought or something of that nature, who are the guys that can get the juice turned back up or find a way to infuse life into this defense again? Bryce Huff is definitely one of those guys. Quinnen Williams seems to be one of the other ones. Hopefully you're getting a guy like Jermaine Johnson jumping up into that mode. You have your DJ Reeds, your Sauce Gardners. But how important will Bryce Huff ultimately be? And we'll have to wait and see what that answer, truly ends up being for the New York Jets. Is it worth being able to get resources from Bryce Huff and field an offense that should, by subtraction, right, getting rid of Bryce Huff to bring in a premium asset in the draft or to get you a key premium offensive player? I would imagine that is a general pretty big net benefit for the New York Jets. Now, regarding Bryce Huff's situation, right, we've had for the last 2 years multiple trade interest calls from GMs around the league, right? We've seen Joe Douglas decline that for multiple years now. This one's a little bit different because Bryce Huff has seen more snaps than you've seen at any point previously with the New York Jets, and they've actually been able to get a decent amount of run plays in there as well to see if he would be a huge hindrance in that area. And that hasn't necessarily been the case, right? He went from about putrid to being able to be somewhat about average from what we've seen so far. The question will really be, again, trade value over his impact on the defense. And it's kind of a question of Bryce Huff versus John Franklin Myers versus Will McDonald. You already have Robert Saleh saying that Will McDonald, he has the belief in to be a superstar. If that's the case, you can kind of give him the Jermaine Johnson treatment ideally, right? He comes back, he evolves his body over the course of the offseason. We already love the repertoire of moves he's had. He's been able to slow pace himself in so that he can get acclimated to this defense. So you would expect from a first-round pick a pretty significant jump for a guy that has been as close to we've gotten as giving players, the red shirt treatment, right? So who do you choose, right? If you opt to get rid of a Bryce Huff, what's the solution? Are you comfortable with Will McDonald? If you choose Bryce Huff, does that mean that you take a look at trying to trade or cut a guy like John Franklin Myers? You already have to consider that we're going to see guys like Carl Lawson gone and probably Al Woods with him coming off that major injury and being, I want to say he's like 38 now or so. And then Quentin Jefferson now has a significant injury. So we're going to need to rebuild the interior as well. You probably don't want as many question marks at the edge position spot. Who knows, though? Again, timing isn't great. You're talking about minimal cap space. We have plenty of offensive priorities that we need to consider over the defense. And I would argue that if we do, and, we have the reports once again, that we expect no changes, so Robert Saleh should be back. We've seen that we've been able to unearth gems. We've been able to make good on, first round draft picks. Basically, anybody that we acquire on the defense, more likely than not, we will turn into a success story. It's not the case on offense, right? So you need to take a drastically different approach there. I'd argue that you can go and find you another guy like a Michael Clemens that's maybe more of a pass rush specialist to kind of help offset things. In terms of playing devil's advocate when it comes to letting a guy like Bryce Huff go. You take a look at the cap situation. These numbers seem way off to me, potentially. But again, we talked about Bryce Huff before and him being a bit of an oddball. Yes, he's elite, but you compare his snap totals to, other starters and key players around the league, and he's nowhere within the same realm, although he's outproducing many of those guys, right? So it's an interesting conversation that'll come up when they finally sit down at the table. But per Spotrac, they were projecting a 4-year, $36.6 million contract. It's about $9.2 million on average. Now, if this was the range we're actually looking at, I'm jumping at signing him, right? I'll cut a JFM in a heartbeat. I mean, maybe he takes the position of a guy like Carl Lawson instead, and, we don't ultimately end up bringing him back. Who knows? Plus, there's that whole argument about great teams find a way to keep their elite players, right? So, I don't know, unless an offer blows them away, right? Because, at this point, you can argue Joe Douglas won out by declining previous trade interest calls because Bryce Huff's trade value isn't going to be any higher than what we've currently seen from him. And so he should win, right? Who knows what the potential picks or packages that were being offered before were. But at this point, you can argue that he's definitely worth a first or second round tender now, right? Or at least that's the mindset. I'm not settling for anything less than a day 2 pick at this point. And he could probably give you back multiple picks if you want to get creative. Now, for the Jets, right, part of what the hindrance on our side is, our current cap situation isn't great. Per Spotrac, we have about $6.4 million in space. 2024, we should have a projected about $15.2 million. Keep in mind, we have all the offensive needs still. You still want to upgrade from Jordan Whitehead. And the only other good news that's coming in is, of course, you have some of the potential cuts again, like a Carl Lawson. You have, Al Woods. You have Quentin Jefferson is coming off the books, although they only signed 1-year deals. But you have some maneuverability with the restructures and guys that you plan on cutting to add to that. And then you throw into the loop that the cap totals projected for the NFL next year were about $240 million from what I saw. So you're talking about maybe worst case scenario, the New York Jets are looking to be in about the $24 to $25 million range, pending any cuts and creative financing, we can call it. And then, of course, you have the final solution, right? You talk about a tag and trade situation if it does come to ultimately trying to move on from Bryce Huff. And a lot of our money will be eaten up in a situation like that, right? Projected franchise tag for a DE in 2024 is supposed to be about $23.3 million. So all in all, it's tough, right? Ultimately, it would benefit the New York Jets to keep him on the roster. But again, if you can find a way to get a round 1 pick, maybe a day 2 pick and some multiple day 3s, a premium player for player trade, although those are rare, I say you jump at the opportunity. But I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Again, it begs the question, will Bryce Huff truly be prioritized this offseason, or are we going to be looking at ways to get away from an expensive contract, even though it's going to be an elite guy to kind of help out Aaron Rodgers in the offensive side? So let me know where you stand on the situation, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.